Webcomics are a lot of work, and I totally mean that because a lot of us will spend months or even years investing our time into this one story that we want to see. And obviously, sometimes down the road, we will ask ourselves, isn't there an easier way to make this happen? Which is why I will now count 7 of the most helpful tips and tricks that I discovered throughout the time of working on my own webcomic for now over a year and a half. And I hope that there will be some helpful tips for you guys out there. Now, just a little disclaimer at the beginning of this video. If there are tips that will not be helpful for you or that you don't want to follow, you obviously can just ignore them. Only pick the tips that you find helpful for your own comic and ignore the others. By the way, if you want to check out my comic, it is linked in the description. Also my Patreon page if you want to support me and my comics in the future as well. Alright, so let's start with the very first tip, which is really basic, and I would say a lot of y'all are already doing this, but I am still mentioning it for everyone who's still a beginner, and that is having your color palette. Having a color palette that you already saved as a picture and that you can just use as the right tab on the top on ClipStudioPaint. You will probably see a good example of my speed paint in the video, so you can really easily replicate that, and I think it is the easiest way. Another option would obviously be to just have a color palette at the right below your color wheel, so you can pick them there as well. And you can actually name them too. So if some colors might seem really similar and they are confusing you, you can just name them and make your life a little easier. Now, the second main tip that saved me a lot of time, and I know a lot of y'all will not like to hear this, however I do need to say it, and that is name your layers. Now, I didn't do that in the beginning, and I wasted so much time always looking for the right layer, and it's ridiculous how much time this actually takes. You can also put them into folders to have a better overview, and trust me, having a clear overview of all of your layers will save yourself a lot of time. Obviously, it is even better the more layers you have or the more layers you need to manage, but obviously, if you're only doing an illustration, you probably don't need to do that, but for an episode there might come a lot of different layers and things that you easily want to change, maybe color specific things, so you don't need to completely overchange them if you don't like them. So it is absolutely a time saver, specifically in the beginning, and I absolutely recommend doing that. Now, the third tip in my eyes is that you need to cut corners where you can. And that absolutely means that you shouldn't pick your battles. You shouldn't do every single panel as a full-fledged illustration. I would recommend often using the last panel or the last couple of panels of an episode to make them as pretty as possible, specifically if it is more dramatic and a cliffhanger, so people will come back because they often remember the last thing that they have read. So it is definitely smarter to put this more often at the end or maybe in the beginning, and the middle part of the update can be a little bit more simplistic. It doesn't need to be super pretty. I definitely recommend doing that because I currently also, I'm getting more and more to the point where everything gets a little bit more complicated in my art style, etc. And I mean, I have a lot of fun, which is why I am doing it. But I don't know if I would recommend that to a beginner. So definitely try to simplify your work ethic, etc., and to not make it too complicated, at least not in the beginning. If you're already more advanced, this is obviously something that you can ignore, but I would definitely recommend that in the beginning. Now, the fourth tip that I would definitely recommend, and I know this is a little bit more controversial in the webcomic community, however, I do need to say it, and that is 3D backgrounds. Now, you can use or you can find 3D backgrounds in ClipStudioPaint or the 3D warehouse of SketchUp. They are mostly free there. However, they often don't look that good, but you can definitely find some good cheap ones or some good free ones. My personal favorite, however, is the website Akin 3D. However, they are pretty pricey, so I don't know if I would recommend that to someone who is still a minor or who doesn't have an income. So in the beginning, I would try to find more free 3D backgrounds that you can use. Now, there's also something really important. If you use 3D backgrounds, please edit them a little bit because they can look really weird if your art style is really different from them. And maybe I will make an additional video to show how you can try to make 3D backgrounds look as pretty and as fitting to your own art style as much as possible. Now, I know there are a lot of people who will say, no, don't use 3D backgrounds, don't do that. Because 3D backgrounds often don't match with your art style, they can look a little cold and lifeless. And if you have a story, maybe a fantasy or a supernatural story or something like that, obviously putting more time into your backgrounds and drawing some of them is definitely something that you should consider. However, if you are in a similar situation as me and you have a story where your characters are mostly talking in buildings and in rooms and all of that, it honestly isn't worth your time. And we gotta keep in mind that you are probably completely on your own doing this, so we need to keep management in mind. Now, the fifth tip that I would recommend doing is using 3D models as a rough guide. Now, please, what I'm saying is using them as a rough guide like a sketch in a way, but not completely tracing over them. Because honestly, guys, I think it's really obvious when creators use them. I can pretty much immediately tell if someone just traced over them, and it can look really weird. And honestly, I don't think that it is as much fun as just tracing over them. However, they are good as a rough guide, and sometimes you gotta ignore some of the anatomy issues that they mostly have because they just look really weird. But for more complicated panels, they can definitely be really helpful, and I don't think that it is cheating or anything like that because a lot of people will accuse you of that if you use them. You should use everything that is in your possibilities to make this entire process way easier and more time-saving. So don't feel bad for using them, but I wouldn't recommend completely tracing over them because it can look really super weird. Now, the next tip that I would definitely recommend, and I absolutely love doing that to be honest, is reusing old panels, specifically introducing shots, etc. You can absolutely use the line art of older panels and maybe just change them a little bit, etc. to just recolor them, and you can definitely save yourself a lot of time and a lot of stress. Because often you will end up drawing another panel that will probably look really similar to an older panel. And I want to clarify that it is not laziness to reuse old panels, because I have seen so many people saying that the creators are lazy for reusing panels and not completely drawing them from scratch again. And honestly, this is completely stupid because a lot of really professional animation studios, etc., will reuse animations to show them more often. I think it was pretty noticeable in animes like the 4th season of Haikyuu, for example. But a lot of professionals do that, and there's nothing lazy about it because we do try to get this done one day. We want to finish this, so it's okay. Reuse panels. It will save you a ton of time. Now for the last tip. Honestly, the last tip, I haven't done it myself, but it is having a hat turnaround. Now, maybe I will put an example right now in the video so you can, or you will immediately know what I'm talking about. It is having a head panel of your character's face in nearly every position. So you can just drag them in and maybe change or just drawing the hair and the clothes, etc. And it is such a cool and such a good idea. And I honestly want to do this myself, but it just haven't gotten the time to do that yet. But honestly, it's just such a big brain move. So I would definitely recommend doing that. And I want to do this myself. Yeah, that pretty much concludes all of the tips that I think are really helpful to save yourself some time. There are definitely way more tips out there that maybe have already been talked about, but I just couldn't include them all because I don't want to make this video too long. However, I hope that some of the tips might have been helpful for you. And if you have some tips of your own, definitely write them down in the comment section, and maybe some tips are already really helpful for you. Okay, all right. That's pretty much it. I hope you liked the video. Give it a like and maybe subscribe. Blink, blink. That's pretty much it. And don't forget to check out my social media, my Patreon, my comic in the description down below. And yeah, we will see each other in the next video. So bye bye.